Prime Minister, geopolitics back to the fore with Iran's attack on Israel. How are you assessing prospects of a wider conflict in the Middle East?
Well, look, I think we join with the rest of the international community. We are concerned, and what we don't want to see is don't want to see the escalation of conflict in the region. It's the last thing the region needs. We want to see people showing restraint, and most importantly, we need the parties and the sides to get around the negotiating table and to commence the Middle East peace process, ultimately with a vision of delivering a two-state solution. So that's a long-standing position of ours, and we've been calling consistently for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire and a cessation of hostilities.
Do you condemn Iran for the attack? Do you condemn Israel for its attack on Damascus?
We condemn Iran for the attack. I mean, it was unprecedented in terms of what we've seen in the region. But what's important now is that actually all parties show restraint so that actually the region can get back into a process that's important.
What are you most concerned about if there is an escalation? Is it to do with perhaps impact on supply chains as well as the global economy?
Well, I mean, to be honest, our primary thought is actually with the suffering and the pain and suffering of the people in the region. It's been a region that's gone through a tremendous amount, and we've seen the conflict in Israel-Gaza. We think about the suffering of people in Palestine, but also in Israel as well. And that's something that we really want to see stability in the region, because it's actually about people and it's about their livelihoods and their lives, and it's been horrendously disrupted in a catastrophe. So we really want to make sure that we actually see peace break out in that region.
Given rising geopolitical concerns, do you see a need for New Zealand to realign itself with traditional partners like the Western world, like the US? How are you looking at it?
Well, like I just say, New Zealand is a country that, like many other countries, has an independent foreign policy that acts in its own interests. What is very much in our interests is within the Indo-Pacific region to see stability and security, but also to see prosperity and peace break out. And so we know there's heightened tensions. There's certainly a lot more geopolitical competition in our part of the world now. But what's important for us is to make sure that we build and deepen relationships with like-minded countries that stand up for the values that we believe very strongly in, but equally that we're able to work with all countries across the region.
Speaking of strategic alliances, AUKUS, case in point, we know that Prime Minister Albanese has said that it's not looking for a fourth nation to join AUKUS. I know that New Zealand as well as Japan, for instance, have expressed interest. Are you of the same understanding, and are you in negotiations? Where are negotiations when it comes to AUKUS?
Look, our position really has remained unchanged from the previous administration in New Zealand, which is that we are open to exploring Pillar 2 AUKUS to see whether there's any opportunities for any involvement there. Obviously, the pathway has been opened up for Pillar 2 discussions and conversations in the recent weeks, and we'll obviously take our time over the course of the coming months and year to consider and explore what they may look like.
When do you think a decision may be made whether or not you'll be allowed in?
Well, look, no timelines about that. And again, it'd be premature from a New Zealand point of view, because what we've said is we're open to exploring the opportunities that may exist in Pillar 2 under AUKUS. And so, we do think AUKUS is a positive for the region. We think it actually brings some security and stability to the region. As I said before, in the previous government before me, we're open to exploring if there's an opportunity for New Zealand in that.
You talked about the South China Sea. We know that China has been more aggressive in the area, tensions especially between China and the Philippines as well. How are you assessing China's actions in the South China Sea?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, New Zealand doesn't take a position on the individual claims within the South China Sea.
But you must be concerned because a lot of your trade passes through the South China Sea.
Correct, and what we do say is that we expect all parties to actually adhere to international law, and we certainly want the parties to de-escalate tensions and to negotiate diplomatically. That's very important to us. You are right, we are a small trading nation. And so things like freedom of navigation, international rule of law, those are values that are very important to us and we want to stand up for.
New Zealand has always adopted a conciliatory tone when it comes to China. How do you describe relations between the two countries right now?
Well, look, we have a long-standing and important relationship with China. It's been the case for many decades now. But what we do is we cooperate where we can, and that's in areas of trade and certainly in areas of climate change. We have a strong set of values, which where we have differences of opinion, given our differences in our political systems, where we stand up and actually predictably and consistently, publicly and privately, articulate where those differences are. And also, where we see alignment with like-minded countries, we do that as well. But it's it's an important relationship for New Zealand. Yes, it's a complex one, but it's important that we actually continue to build and develop trade opportunities that are there, but equally stand up for where we have differences as well.
Some people have said that China's trying to get more influence in the Pacific. It's already signed a security deal with Solomon Islands and possibly Papua New Guinea. How do you look at China's presence in the Pacific? Are you concerned about it?
Well, look, I mean, it's certainly a more contested, Pacific than we've seen in recent decades. No doubt about that. Our view is very simply, it's a place that we call home, and we certainly partner very well with the other Pacific Island nations who are sovereign states in their own rights. As they work with different development partners, a bit like ASEAN centrality. We have something called the Pacific Island Forum, which is the central mechanism by which development partners should work with Pacific Island nations as well. So for us, it's a region that is really suffering tremendously from climate change in particular, and so a lot of our focus in a development sense is working with our partners in the Pacific Islands to work with them on climate change, which for many of them is an existential threat.
How are you looking at building your relations with China? Are you planning to visit China anytime soon?
Look, I will do at some point.
This year?
Well, it won't be this year just by virtue of the schedule, but it is my intention to get to China, and it's a very important market for us.
How do you plan to build a relationship?
Well, I mean, we've already had a visit from the foreign minister. We've actually got my trade minister in China this week as well. So we have a long-standing relationship there. As I said, it's an area where a relationship where we cooperate around trade and climate change, and as you've seen, we are pretty consistent and predictable with the Chinese in private and also publicly where we have differences.
Prime Minister, I want to talk about the domestic economy. It is in recession, contracted 4 out of the last 5 quarters. What's the plan to revive growth in the country?
Well, look, I mean, the first thing I'd say is I think New Zealand has fantastic potential. I personally think it's the best country on earth, and you'd expect me to say that, but
it is beautiful.
It is without doubt. It is without doubt. And I think we have a fantastic future ahead of us. We have 2 things that we've got to do. One is in terms of rebuilding the economy. It's making sure we get the cost of living crisis under control for people. What you've seen is a huge amount of government spending that's driven domestic inflation, lifted interest rates, slowed the economy up, and obviously puts pressure on unemployment. And so we're working incredibly hard to bring inflation down. We've made some good progress already in the 150 or so days that I've been in power. You've actually seen there's no further rise in interest rates. We've seen inflation trending down. We hope to have it back within our band by the end of the year as well. And that will make a huge difference for New Zealanders who are struggling with the cost of living crisis. Inflation under control, interest rates coming down, the economy growing, and obviously people secure in employment. And then the really exciting work is actually how do we really turbocharge growth in New Zealand? And that for us is making sure that we invest in a world-class education system, embrace the science technology, certainly make sure we build out modern, reliable infrastructure, get rid of red tape and have smart regulation, but get rid of red tape and green tape, and importantly have international connections to the world, both in a trade and investment sense. And that's why I'm here in Southeast Asia this week, is just to underscore how important Southeast Asia is to New Zealand going forward.
You talked about inflation. Inflation due out tomorrow. It's expected to ease, but still the 4 handle. Can inflation continue to decline and ease given what's happening in the U.S., inflation remaining elevated and sticky?
Yeah, look, I think in New Zealand, we're very focused as a government. We have our budget coming up at the end of May. That is a chance for us to make sure that we are generating good financial discipline and a good culture of financial discipline. We won't repair everything that happened in the previous 6 years of 1 year's budget, but we are very determined to have a very consistent approach to managing our finances and getting our fiscal books in order. And so we've got a major exercise on with respect to our government spending, making sure we're getting rid of the wasteful spending. We think that is the way to support certainly lowering inflation, domestic inflation, which then brings those interest rates down and gets the economic growth happening as well. We also think it's important that we're able to offer tax relief to lower middle income New Zealanders as well after 14 years of not having any tax relief, and we think that's an important thing as well.
You talked about wanting to boost growth, yet you're also considering, your government is considering cutting spending at the upcoming budget. How does that help to revive growth. How does that help the economy?
Well, look, we've had an 84% increase in government spending in the previous 6 years, and what we've acknowledged and what we've identified is that actually there's a lot of inefficient and wasteful government spending. What we want to do is prioritise and protect our frontline public services, but we actually expect every taxpayer dollar to make sure it generates a return on that investment and it actually delivers for the New Zealand people. And so what we've identified is inefficiencies and savings and wasteful programs, and making sure that we actually direct that money into repairing our books, but also importantly protecting our frontline services.
New Zealand has said time and time again that it is open for business, yet there are policies that go against that. For instance, most foreigners are not allowed to buy housing in the country. Might you reconsider that? Is that hindering investments in New Zealand?
Well, look, I mean, what we're looking at is making sure that New Zealand is a much more attractive place for foreign investment. It's really important to us because we want to be able to partner with foreign capital to actually build out certainly big tracts of our infrastructure. But what we are doing is making it sure that any resource and consenting and urban planning legislation, regulations, we're making sure that we actually speed that up. A lot of that has been bureaucratic, and we want to make sure that there's what we call a fast track provision, so that actually projects of regional or national interest can get approved and actioned and start happening in a much quicker and much faster way. We're actually working much harder on sort of making sure there's funding and financing tools that are available so we can do public-private partnerships, value capture, all of those things where we can use private capital in partnership with public capital as well. So look, we are in a short period of time, we've done a number of things to make sure it's easier to do business. The good thing is that New Zealand has been consistently ranked as one of the most transparent, trustworthy places in the world. It's one of the places that's easy to do business in. And yes, we're continuing to make sure that we can work our way through to make sure that remains the case.
Your Deputy Prime Minister has come out to say that perhaps he'll consider allowing foreigners to buy housing if they invest in the country at the same time. Is that something you're actively considering?
Well, look, I mean, as I said, we want to make sure we can attract foreign investment to New Zealand. We think it's really important, and we'll consider to look at a range of policies that look at doing exactly that. What we've started with first and foremost is making sure we get rid of the bureaucracy. We make sure that it's easier to deliver and do projects and get them approved in New Zealand, and then make sure that we actually put in place new funding and financing tools that encourages that foreign capital and also domestic pools of capital to come in and actually partner with private capital and build the infrastructure we need.
Prime Minister, just one final question. You're in Singapore. We're on the cusp of a new Prime Minister, and you've met Lawrence Wong. Your impression of the man and also the kind of relationship you hope to build? Well,
the first thing I'd say is I just want to acknowledge Prime Minister Lee, because it's a 20-year legacy that's something that's been incredibly, it's been a fantastic legacy for Singapore, certainly the Singapore-New Zealand relationship, but he's a hugely respected leader from all around the world. I've also met Lawrence Wong. It's the second time I met with him last night, an hour after he was announced as the successor, and I can say he's a fantastic leader as well, and I think he's going to continue to build on the legacy of Singapore, and I feel very, very confident that with him and I working together, we're going to be able to elevate our enhanced partnership as we celebrate what will be 60 years of Singapore next year. So no, I think he's a fantastic leader, and I'm really looking forward to working with him.